Assalamualaikum. We are from group 9. We present about cocoa plant. Okay, we begin with introduction of cocoa. Okay, the scientific name of cocoa is Theobroma cacao and native is in tropical rainforest area of Central and South America. Traditionally, crop cocoa varieties belong to three main groups, which is Criollo, Forastero, and Trinitario. Cocoa tree consists of root, stem, flower, leaf, and pod. It takes about 5 years to cocoa tree to grow mature and start producing cocoa pod. The beans grow in football-shaped pods on the trunk of the tree and from larger branches. The average cocoa tree produces 30 to 40 cocoa pods a year, which means 2 times harvesting in a year. Cocoa tree are highly dependent on temperature, which mainly affect vegetative growth, flowering, and fruit development. Soil flooding, decreased leaf area, stomatal conductance, and photosynthetic rates in addition to inducing formation of lenticels and adventitious roots. Function pods. For each pod has numerous ridges running along its length and hold 20 to 66 and covered with a sweet sticky white pulp. Cacao azocarp is the thick shell of the pod, which is the external layer. It has a kernel surface that serves to protect the whole fruit. And the color of the exocarp will depend on two things, which is the pod natural color and its ripening level. Seed from the tree cocoa are the source of cocoa, cocoa butter, and chocolate.
So now let's look at the reproduction of cocoa flower. As you can see here, this is the structure of cocoa flower. Here we have sepals, petals, flower stalk and stamens. Basically, the fully developed cocoa flowers have 5 free sepals, 5 free petals, 10 stamens which are 5 fertile and the other 5 is non-fertile staminose and an ovary of 5 limited carpels. The petals are narrow at the base but extend into cup-shaped pouch. The petals are usually light pink and yellowish white in color, which it may vary slightly and can indicate by a given genotype. The style is twice as long as the ovary and consists of 5 parts around an axis. The fused style has the appearance of being single, but it is divided at the tip into 5 stigmas. So now let's discover on pollination of cocoa flower. As for its pollination, there are two types of pollination occur, which are hand pollination and insect pollination. As for hand pollination, it is meant to artificially transfer the pollen from the male part of the flower to the female part, which has been done by hand, as both for the tiny size of the cocoa flower as the female part is very hidden inside the flower. As for insect pollination, basically this is the common way where the cocoa flower is pollinated by the tiny insects such as bees or tiny flies, also known as entomophilous pollination. When an insect visits the flower to get food, some pollen will stick to its body. The insect then flies off to another flower where some of the pollen may be transferred to the stigma. This transfer of pollen from one flower to another is also called as cross-pollination. To understand more about pollination by hand, let's take a look at the video provided in the next slide.
So next we will continue with the third part for this presentation, which is the technology used for the cocoa plant breeding. Cocoa plant breeding involves the use of various technologies to develop cocoa varieties with desirable traits. So there are a few technologies that we use to breed the cocoa plant. The first one is traditional breeding. Second, marker assisted selection (MAS). The third one, genomic selection. Fourth, tissue culture and in vitro techniques. And the last one is biotechnology and genetic engineering. So, what is traditional breeding? Traditional breeding is a method involve controlled pollination of cocoa plants with desired traits. So, this process requires identifying cocoa trees with desirable characteristics such as disease resistant, high yield, quality flavor, and tolerance to environmental conditions. So, this breeding method is a combination of the desired traits to produce a new offspring. So here is an overview of the steps involved in traditional cocoa plant breeding. So the first step is germplasm collection, which the breeders will collect diverse cocoa germplasm from the various sources. And the next step is phenotypic evaluation. The breeders will observe the cocoa trees with desirable traits that can be used as parents. And next is control pollination, which the pollen from the stamen will be transferred to the pistil. So the desired traits are transformed from the selected parents to the offspring. And the next step is progeny evolution. So the offspring from the control pollination will be planted in the field trials. Next is selection and recombination. So the breeders will select cocoa trees with desired traits for further breeding. And the last step is multi-location trials. So the cocoa from breeding process are tested across two different environment or different location to assess their adaptability. And traditional breeding methods for cocoa plants rely on the natural processes of pollination, selection, and recombination to develop improved cocoa varieties. Next is tissue culture and in vitro techniques. So this techniques is very significant to the cocoa plant breeding because it facilitates rapid multiplication, preservation, and selection of desirable cocoa plant. Here are the steps that involve in tissue culture. So the first step is explant selection. So in the first step in tissue culture is selecting an appropriate explant, which is a small piece of plant tissue that will be used to initiate the culture. So for example of the explants such as shoot tips, nodal segments, and or embryos. And the next step is sterilization. The selected explant are sterilized using alcohol or bleach to remove any contaminants. The next step is culture initiation. The sterilized explants are placed on a nutrient-rich growth medium or also known as
as culture medium. So this culture medium contains a combination of nutrients that will help the growth of the eggplant. And next is callus induction. In some cases, the explants may undergo a phase of callus induction, which is the callus is formed. So callus provide a starting point for further regeneration and differentiation of plantlets. Step is shoot proliferation. So through appropriate manipulation of growth regulators in the culture medium, the callus are induced to form multiple shoots, and these multiple shoots will be further multiplied by repeatedly transferring them to the fresh culture media. And the next step is rooting. So for the rootings, the shoots are induced to develop roots by modifying the growth medium composition. And the next step is acclimatization. So the rooted plantlets are transferred from sterile culture to soil. And the last step is selection and evolution. So through tissue culture and in vitro techniques, the number of identical plantlets are able to be produced largely from the selected cocoa varieties. So these plantlets can be evaluated for desired traits.
Now I will explain on cocoa plant nutrition. The factors affecting cocoa plant growth are types of planting material, soils, and climatic factor. The type of planting material for cocoa plant is crucial as it will affect the yield potential, growth of plant, and nutrient uptake. Also, soil properties are measured and determined to know its ability to supply and store moisture and plant nutrient for plant, and its properties as a medium of growth for roots and root activity. Last but not least, climatic factor can affect nutrient requirement as the rainfall affected soil moisture and temperature will eventually affect overall growth. So the nutrient requirement of cocoa plant are potassium, nitrogen, phosphorus and calcium. Potassium acts as an enzyme activation, photosynthesis, stomatal movement and phloem transport for cocoa plant. Also, nitrogen support vegetative growth and secure high yield. For phosphorus, it works for root development, flowering, pod numbers, and able to boost crop development. Next, calcium will help to produce good, well-structured tree canopies that support high cocoa yield. Besides, other nutrients that required by cocoa plant are sulfur, boron, zinc and magnesium. For instance, sulfur acts as component of enzyme and protein and chlorophyll formation. Also, boron helps to stabilize the plant tissue, improve plant and crop strength, pollen germination and increase crop quality and yield. Besides, zinc can improve flower bud development, quality of flowering, better fruit set and optimize leaf quality. Last but not least, magnesium can combat chlorosis and prevent premature leaf falls and give healthier tree. Next, cocoa tree requires special fertilizer to ensure necessary macronutrient and micronutrient replenish after every harvest. The fertilizer should be applied over the area of active root activity to ensure good uptake. The fertilizer of cocoa plant should contain nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, sulfur, magnesium, zinc and boron in right balance. Normally, chemical fertilizer is easy to blend in the right ratio and easy to handle. Last but not least for my part, soil requirement for cocoa plant is sandy clay loam to clay loam soil. The organic matter level at 3% are preferable for cocoa plant. The pH soil should be maintained with the range between 5 to 7. This is because too low or too high pH could lead to limited production of cocoa.
Now we will proceed to the last part, which is the health benefits and conclusions of the cocoa plant.
Cocoa is rich in micronutrients, polyphenols, and powerful antioxidants, flavonols. It can help reduce inflammation, lower blood pressure, and improve cholesterol and blood sugar. There are few additional facts when planting the cocoa, which are it requires high rainfall and temperatures to grow, as well as rainforest trees to offer shade and protection from too much light and damage from the wind. Because cocoa farms are sensitive to this type of climate, they can only flourish in a narrow band of countries between degrees north and south of the equator. There are many issues that the farmers need to deal with while planting the cocoa to get the healthy and the best condition of the cocoa. But the main issue is the climate change. Since considering that the climate change and the trees interactions, the main component influencing the tree behavior are increasing the atmospheric carbon dioxide, warming, and change in rainfall and drought patterns and duration. Climate change also modify cultivation area characteristics and condition for many crops requirement, such as daily water needs, a high level of relative humidity, and the absence of wind. So we can conclude that cocoa plant is a global demand as the world continues its insatiable appetite for chocolate products with diverse technologies for the breeding of the cocoa plant, and they have a lot of health benefits to humans. That's all from us. Thank you.